later on, they brought me up to a town about 45 miles away from where we lived, and put me into an alcohol and drug rehab center. And that's when I was introduced to AA. I had that's when, see, the second step, I don't know if any of you are familiar with the AA program, but they go by 12 steps. And the second step was that you had to find a higher power greater than yourself. Well, I had walked away from God, so I kind of mocked that concept and told the counselor that, well, I guess my higher power would be then Bart Simpson. And see, the thing about it is I was in and out of AA for 3 months at a time, sober and then drunk, because I could not grasp that concept. And eventually my higher power went from making fun of it to the AA tables to God. And then I later found out, well, we all have this imagination about if we don't really know God and if we don't read our Bible, we're not going to know who God really is. And so then at this time, another thing that AA teaches you and tells you to do is you have to state your name and state that you're an addict and alcoholic. Well, so I was 17 years old, and they're telling me that I'm going to be a drug addict, alcoholic for the rest of my life. You know how that is for a 17-year-old, thinking that you have this life ahead of you and you're going to be an alcoholic and drug addict for the rest of your life? So I kind of felt lonely and trapped. Well, then 6 months after I turned 18, I was working at a pizza place, and I had started throwing up that morning. And so they let me go because I had a hangover. And then shortly after that, the guy I was seeing at the time had gone back to prison. Then 3 days later, I found out I was pregnant. And because I had just lost my job, I had lost my apartment, and my parents wouldn't let me move back in. So that summer, I was living in my car. And I do remember at one time, my mom telling me, you look terrible. People are telling me that you look terrible. I said, Mom, what do you expect? I'm pregnant, and I'm living in my car, and I can't eat right. And in fact, like I said, my mom was a Christian, so I held this against her. I thought, if this is how Christians are going to act, I don't want any part of that. So then, but like I said, I was sober, so, or I was pregnant, so I sobered up, and I was sober for 7 years after. The thing about AA was I always felt like I always fit it in. I always fit in, and I was accepted there. But I believe the only reason why I did sober up at that time was because of the baby. And then time passed, and the guy that I was seeing that got out of jail, the baby, Josh's father, we ended up marrying, and then we moved up here in 1996. And then in 1998, we got divorced, and that's when I started drinking again, and this time I started using harder drugs. I was doing LSD, I dabbled in meth a little bit. So anyways, again, I got kicked out of my apartment. And then, the thing I felt at this time was my ex-husband was really manipulative, and he was also emotionally abusive. He always called me names. So, and then after the divorce, he was always talking bad about me to other people, and so I felt like I had nowhere to turn. So what did I do? I turned to the drugs and alcohol. And of course, I was always looking for a place to fit in at that time too. So I was had friends that would always use me. So, anyways, um, and then in 2001, I got it was about October of 2001 is when I got bronchitis. And I went to the doctor because I was really sick and I didn't know what it was. And so they took x-rays, of my lungs, and they said, well, I want to tell you that you're starting to get emphysema. You got the beginning stages of emphysema, and I like the outdoors. So, she said, okay, I'm going to give you this prescription. You can fill it if you want to, but you don't have to if you don't want to. So, but I did, So, New Year's Day of 2002 is when I had my last, or I should say December 31st of 2001 is when I had my last cigarette. So, God was always working in my life, even before I even served Him. Then, I had, was working at AC at the liquor store as managing that. And, most of you know Mills and Andrea Olson. Well, her daughter was working with me at AC, and she popped her head in the liquor store and says to me, Jesus told me to tell you He still loves you. And I thought that was really weird because He still loves me. Here I'm really far away from God, and my reaction was, how can I've never heard of anybody saying that Jesus talked to them. And he said, well, yeah, He does sometimes. I said, okay. So then I went home to tell Art, and he says to me, yeah, Jesus does love you. And he says to me, I've tried to talk to you many times about God when we sobered up, but I just didn't understand. And to this day, I still don't remember him talking to me about God. So, anyways, then, and then I told him, one other thing I told somebody else was, I really feel like, here I'm 25 years old, and I gave custody to my ex-husband with my 2 boys because he was so manipulative. I thought he told me that he was going to find a way out of paying child support, and he told me that he was going to find a good way to get custody. And I was scared, so I just gave him custody. And so at this time, I thought any chance of having a real family was over. Here I'm 25 years old and already had a wrecked marriage, so I didn't think that was going to happen again. But then I started feeling an urgency in my heart to go back to church. At one time, I remember going to a funeral, and I remember singing singing Amazing Grace, and how I felt a peace in that, just even singing Amazing Grace. And that's when it started turning to where I was like, I really need to go back to church, and the urgency started really getting stronger and stronger. Then somebody else gave me a book called Answers of 200 Life's Most Probing Questions by Pat Robertson. And there was a question in that book that said, how can somebody be a better person? And so I looked it up, and it said, we can try to be better all we want, but if we really don't give our hearts to Jesus, then we're just going to resort back to the same way, like I did with AA. I was always going in and out of it because, I mocked the concept of a God. And so I really wanted to change, and I started contemplating whether I wanted to give my heart to the Lord. And like I said, at this point in my life, I was still smoking marijuana. And then at another point in my search, I was telling somebody else, I'm really thinking about giving my heart to the Lord, but I'm not ready to give up marijuana. I like it too much. It really mellows me out and stuff. And she says, you know what, April? You quit drinking, you quit smoking cigarettes. If that's all you do, I'm sure God will let you into heaven. So, I said, okay, well, right on. Well, then I started going to church. It was either the end of June of 2004 or the beginning of July of watching TVN and I'm saying, you know, anybody be ashamed of Christ, you know, he won't honor us. So anyway, so I remember in the shower praying and just pleading out to God that I wanted him to have my life. And so because, and I told them, please don't let me be ashamed of you either. And so from that on, I got a hunger to share him with anybody that I could. I told them, I mean, I remember working at AC Liquor Store and me just telling people what I did. And I remember the list that I got too. You know, but I just had this urgency. And the thing about it is every single time I shared my faith with somebody,